Most people do not stay poor because they are lazy. They stay poor because they never cross the ignition threshold. They spend their entire adult lives standing in front of a dead financial engine, turning the key halfway, getting one weak click, and then walking away convinced the machine was broken from the start. I have watched this mistake destroy more futures than bad markets ever did. The first $1,000 is not just money, it is ignition. It is the first moment your life stops depending entirely on your next paycheck and starts depending, even a little, on capital that belongs to you. Until that moment, you are pushing the car with your bare hands. After that moment, the engine begins to answer. And that is exactly why the first 1,000 feels brutal. It is not merely arithmetic. Most people think wealth begins when the returns get big. They think the real battle starts at 100,000 or 1 million. That is nonsense. The real battle starts when your account balance is so small that every saved dollar feels ridiculous, every sacrifice feels visible, and every impulse feels more real than your future. When you have $200 to your name, saving $50 does not denial. When you have $700 and an unexpected bill appears, saving another $100 does not feel like progress, it feels like mockery. That is the trap. Your mind is not built to admire distant freedom. It is built to chase immediate relief. A dinner tonight is concrete. A stronger life next decade is abstract. A package at your door is visible. A thicker financial buffer is invisible. Your brain does not naturally reward invisibility. It rewards sensation. It rewards urgency. It rewards now. That is why ordinary people keep losing to tiny decisions. They think the fight is between good spending and bad spending. Usually it is not. The fight is between visible pleasure and invisible power. Pleasure wins by default because power arrives quietly. I learned very early that money is not mainly about buying things. Money is about changing the terms on which you are allowed to live. It buys refusal power. It buys the right to walk away from foolish people, foolish deals, foolish jobs, foolish timing, and foolish fear. But before money buys you choices, you must first survive the phase when it buys you almost nothing visible at all. That is the ignition threshold. Below that threshold, your effort appears to produce no drama. No one congratulates you for not ordering takeout. No one gives you a medal for skipping a weekend of emotional spending. No one sees the $100 you did not spend. All they see is that you became a little less convenient, a little less social, a little less available to nonsense. People love to talk about compound interest. Far fewer people understand compound identity. That is the first hidden mechanism. Before your money compounds, your self-image has to compound. When a person has never saved anything meaningful, he does not merely lack cash. He lacks evidence. He does not believe he is the kind of person who can hold money, direct money, and protect money. He thinks of himself as someone who receives money and then watches it disappear into rent, food, entertainment, debt service, emergencies, and fatigue. That identity is fatal. If you think of yourself as a temporary holder of cash, you will behave like a temporary holder of cash. If you think of yourself as a builder of capital, you will begin to protect even small sums with a different seriousness. That is why the first 1,000 matters so much. It is the first hard proof that you are not only a consumer passing money through your hands, you are an allocator. You are beginning to become an owner. Most people never understand how many little psychological tricks are quietly working against them during this stage. One of them is that the source of money changes the way they treat it. They sweat over paycheck money because it feels heavy and earned. They waste refund money because it feels accidental. They burn gift money because it feels harmless. They spend surprise money because it feels outside the real budget. That is idiocy. A dollar does not change its character because it entered your life through wages, a tax refund, a birthday card, or something you sold online, but your mind plays games with categories. It labels one pile serious and another pile playful. Then it wonders why wealth never forms. Another trick is older and deeper. Many people were handed money scripts long before they earned their first real paycheck. Some were raised in homes where money meant panic, so they learned to associate money with tension. Some were raised around constant phrases of scarcity, so they quietly built an inner ceiling and came to believe stability belonged to other people. Some were raised where money was treated as vulgar, greedy, or emotionally dangerous, so they learned to feel guilty when they even began to get ahead. You can drag those scripts for 30 years and still pretend your problem is just math. It is not just math. Your brain is also carrying ancient survival code. For a very long time in human history, grabbing immediate resources improved your odds of living through tomorrow. Eat now, use now, take now. Do not trust the future. Do not assume another opportunity is coming. That code was useful when winter and famine were around the corner. It is destructive when applied to a direct deposit, a credit card limit, a food delivery app, and a low-friction life full of engineered temptation. You are trying to build long-term capital with a brain that still overvalues immediate comfort. Of course, the first 1,000 feels hard. You are fighting biology, childhood conditioning, social comparison, and a consumption system designed to remove every bit of friction between urge and purchase. Then there is the social cage. Broke behavior loves company. When you begin saving seriously, people around you often interpret discipline as deprivation. They think you became extreme because you now notice the leak in every casual expense. You stop paying retail for convenience every day. You stop letting boredom order your food. You stop letting loneliness define your weekends. You stop treating tiny rewards as harmless, simply because they are common. And suddenly people act as if you have become strange. You have not become strange. You have become aware. Awareness always looks abnormal inside a culture organized around automatic spending. Now let me show you why the first 1,000 is difficult mathematically as well. Suppose you save $100 per month. Many people hear that and dismiss it because they are used to dreaming in large numbers and failing in small actions. But $100 per month is enough to reveal the structure. If you start from zero, it takes 10 months to reach 1,000. 10 months is long enough for discouragement to visit you repeatedly. 10 months is long enough for your car to need repairs, for your friends to invite you somewhere foolish, for your own mood to turn against you, for your patience to ask whether any of this is worth it. 10 months with little visible payoff is exactly where most people quit. Not because the plan is wrong, because the early phase looks unimpressive. That is what destroys them. They demand emotional fireworks from a stage of the process that can only offer proof of discipline. They want the engine to roar before they have even filled the line with fuel. But once you hit 1,000, a subtle shift begins. Part of the shift is psychological. You now possess evidence. You can say, not theoretically but concretely, that you saved a meaningful amount of money. Your mind cannot tell the old story in quite the same way anymore. The story used to be, I can never get ahead. Now the story becomes, I have done it once. I can do it again. That difference sounds small. It is enormous. A person with no proof must fight doubt every time. A person with proof fights only inconsistency. And part of the shift is mathematical. Once that first pile exists, even modest returns begin to assist you. Not dramatically at first. That is important. Many people lose because they expect a miracle and cannot respect a whisper. At ordinary long-run market-like returns, your second 1,000 arrives faster than your first. Then the next arrives faster than that. By the time you are marching toward 10,000, each additional 1,000 takes less time because your effort no longer works alone. Your capital has joined the labor force. That is the ignition event. You are still adding fuel, but now the machine contributes. Most people never get to enjoy this stage because they keep interrupting the process. They build a few hundred, then rate it. They gather a small emergency reserve, then treat it like permission to resume careless living. They reach 1,000, then reward themselves for the achievement by killing the thing that made the achievement possible. That is not celebration. That is sabotage. You must understand the sequence. In the beginning, behavior does nearly all the work. Later, capital begins to do meaningful work. Much later, capital does astonishing work. But if you keep shutting the engine off to admire your own dashboard, you will spend your entire life restarting. This is why the poor often feel exhausted by money, and the wealthy often feel energized by it. Poor people are manually pushing a stalled machine every month. Wealthy people, if they are sensible, are feeding an engine that has already been started. When I say sensible, I mean people who understand that the game changes after ignition. At first, saving feels like subtraction. Then it becomes proof. Then it becomes momentum. Then it becomes identity. Then it becomes addiction of the healthiest kind. You begin to look at spending differently. The expensive dinner is no longer just a dinner. It is fuel you are diverting away from the engine. The impulse purchase is no longer just a treat. It is friction added to a machine trying to reach operating speed. The unnecessary fee is not small anymore. It is drag. The high-interest balance is not a nuisance. It is reverse ignition. It is a fire burning in the wrong direction. That is another point ordinary people miss. Positive compounding is not the only compounding in the world. Debt compounds, fees compound. Lifestyle inflation compounds. Emotional spending compounds. Financial passivity compounds. Everything compounds. The question is never whether compounding is happening. The question is whether it is building your freedom or eating it. A man who carries credit card debt at ugly rates while trying to save his first $1,000 is trying to light a furnace in a windstorm. A woman who gets a raise and immediately upgrades every part of her lifestyle is pouring new fuel on the road instead of into the tank. A young worker who keeps telling himself he will get serious later is not pausing his financial life. He is compounding delay. Delay has a cost. Confusion has a cost. Low standards have a cost. Denial has a cost. You do not need a dramatic collapse to damage your future. You only need years of low-grade leakage. That is why I have always respected people who learn to make small, consistent, seemingly unglamorous decisions. They are usually building more than a brokerage account. They are building an operating temperament. And temperament, not IQ, decides most financial outcomes. Once your savings start to grow, another transformation takes place. You stop seeing money as spending power and start seeing it as choice power. That is when the engine becomes emotionally real. With no savings, a job is not an arrangement. It is a dependency. With no savings, a rude boss is not irritating. He is dangerous. With no savings, a sudden bill is not inconvenient. It is destabilizing. With no savings, every decision is distorted by urgency. That is what poverty does, even before it becomes visible. It compresses your time horizon, it cheapens your standards, it narrows your imagination. It makes bad deals look necessary. The first $1,000 does not solve all of that. But it is the first breach in that prison wall. It says you are no longer entirely owned by the next emergency. The next $10,000 deepens that breach. The next $50,000 changes the emotional weather of your life. At $10,000 you are not rich, but the engine is alive. At $20,000 you are not free, but the machine can now produce enough movement to make the process feel real. At $50,000, assuming you do not behave like a fool, your capital begins generating a meaningful share of what you once had to create entirely with labor. Now the engine noise changes. You start to understand why disciplined people become almost calm around money. They are not calm because they are calm because they have built distance between their life and immediate chaos. A person with no buffer is forced into reaction. A person with capital can choose response. That difference is civilization at the individual level. Let me say something unfashionable. Most people waste too much time talking about earning more before they learn how to keep and direct what they already earn. I am in favor of earning more. Very much so. But higher income poured into a broken system does not create wealth. It creates bigger mistakes. You can earn more and still never cross the ignition threshold if every gain is absorbed by status, convenience, self-soothing, and expansion of fixed costs. I have seen people with modest incomes build engines. I have seen high earners remain permanently stalled. The difference was not always income. Often it was routing. Money must be routed with intention, or it will route itself toward appetite. That is why I prefer systems to speeches. If you wait to feel motivated every month, your future will always be at the mercy of your mood. Mood is unreliable. Automation is reliable. Routine is reliable. Pre-commitment is reliable. A person who moves money automatically before seeing it is behaving like an engineer. A person who promises to save what is left at the end of the month is behaving like a gambler. There is usually nothing left at the end of the month because the month is full of frictionless exits. That is why your first $1,000 needs protection. Not inspiration. Protection. Reduce the number of decisions, reduce the number of weak moments, reduce the number of pathways from stress to spending. If lunch out every day is a hidden emotional anesthetic for a miserable job, do not merely lecture yourself about lunch. Understand the mechanism. You are not just buying food, you are buying relief. If shopping is your little rebellion against boredom, admit it. If bars are your stand and for belonging, admit that too. If every convenience purchase is compensation for exhaustion, say so clearly. You cannot solve an emotional leak with a mathematical slogan. But once you name the leak, you can redesign the route. That is what adults do. They stop moralizing every expense and start diagnosing it. Wealth building gets easier when you stop asking, how do I become more disciplined? Ask instead, what keeps pushing me to spend in ways that weaken my engine? The answer might be fatigue, it might be poor sleep, it might be debt pressure, it might be a social circle organized around appearance, It might be shame. It might be an underpaid life that you keep trying to emotionally subsidize with purchases. Whatever it is, identify it and stop pretending the problem is mysterious. Now let me tell you why this matters beyond the first 1,000. Because the same engine logic governs the rest of your life. At the beginning, progress looks tiny and invisible. Later, it becomes measurable. Later still, it becomes undeniable. That is true in investing. It is true in skill development. It is true in reputation. It is true in health. It is true in nearly every worthwhile thing. Weak people quit in the invisible stage because they cannot tolerate an effort curve that feels unfair. Strong people understand that unfairness is often just incubation. That is why the crowd admires outcomes it never had the temperament to build. By the time somebody reaches serious financial stability, observers often imagine the person was always different. They imagine a special gene, some secret edge, some unusual luck, some elegant insight. Sometimes luck matters. But very often the truth is duller and more useful. The person learned to survive the ugly beginning. He learned how to make boredom productive. She learned how to respect low visibility progress. They learned to stop demanding that every month feel rewarding. That is rare. And rarity gets paid. The first 1,000 is also where you discover whether you prefer looking stable or becoming stable. Looking stable is easy. Nice car payment, updated phone, regular restaurant habits, convenient subscriptions, presentable lifestyle, emotional camouflage. Becoming stable is different. It often looks underwhelming for a while. It can even look socially unimpressive. You repeat small actions with very little applause, but underneath, the engine is being assembled. And once assembled, it changes every future decision. A person with a working financial engine can invest in skill without panic. A person with a working financial engine can walk away from manipulation. A person with a working financial engine can survive time between opportunities. A person with a working financial engine can say no. Refusal power is one of the highest return assets you will ever own. Most people sell it too cheaply because they never got through the hard first stage of building it. Let us talk about the famous leap from 1,000 to 10,000. People hear that the next 10,000 becomes easier and think this is motivational theater. It is not. It becomes easier because 4 things begin to work together. First, your identity changes. Second, your habits simplify. Third, your capital begins contributing. Fourth, your standards rise. You stop treating every extra dollar as available for emotional use. You begin assigning it a job. Bonuses, refunds, small windfalls, extra work income, side earnings, all of it gets judged by a new rule. Does this strengthen the engine or delay it? That is not deprivation. That is capital allocation. The poor often think allocation is something rich people do with portfolios. No, allocation begins with your grocery habits, your lease, your debt choices, your insurance decisions, your digital subscriptions, your coping mechanisms, and your willingness to finance nonsense. By the time someone reaches 10,000, if he has done it correctly, he is not merely richer. He is sharper. He sees leaks faster. He recognizes friction sooner. He feels the future more concretely. He starts making decisions against his lifetime, not just against this Friday. That is sophistication. No spreadsheet can substitute for it. Then one day the process turns from effort into evidence. You check an account and see gains that came while you were asleep. Not huge gains. That is not the point. The point is that you finally witness your capital moving without your hands on it. That moment matters because the engine is no longer hypothetical. It is alive. This is usually when people become genuinely excited, not because they discovered greed, but because they discovered leverage. They realize life no longer has to be 100% labor. Powered, that realization is intoxicating in the best possible way. Now the person who once resisted saving starts seeking it. He looks for ways to cut, not because he enjoys restriction, but because he can feel the drag more clearly. She welcomes a tax refund, not as permission to splurge, but as extra fuel. He becomes interested in fees, taxes, and asset location. Not because he became a finance geek, but because he finally understands that small percentages are invisible thieves. Once you understand engines, you start respecting friction. That is why sloppy people rarely become free. They do not respect drag. They dismiss small expenses, small delays, small fees, small indulgences, small debts, small leaks, because each one is individually easy to excuse. But freedom is not destroyed by one giant wrong move, nearly as often as it is destroyed by constant low-grade drag. If you want a miserable financial life, there is an easy formula. Ignore little leaks. Rationalize convenience. Finance depreciating vanity. Call emotional spending self-care. Say you will get serious later. Keep your money where it grows slowly and your appetite where it grows fast. Then tell yourself income is the only thing holding you back. That formula is common. That is why financial fragility is common. The opposite formula is much less dramatic. Protect the first 1,000, build it as proof. Turn proof into routing. Turn routing into momentum. Turn momentum into capital. Turn capital into refusal power. Turn refusal power into a calmer life. That is how adults do it. Not with lottery fantasies. Not with market heroics. Not by pretending the first stage should feel glamorous. I want to be especially clear about one thing. The first 1,000 is hard not because you are weak, but because the stage is designed to feel thankless. There is no help from capital yet. There is little admiration, there is constant temptation, there is very little visible status gain, and there is a lot of emotional friction because your old identity fights back. So if it has felt hard for you, good. That means you are in the real part. The question is not whether it is unfair, the question is whether you are going to keep turning the key. Because once the ignition catches, your entire financial life changes character. The engine is still small, yes, but small engines become large engines if they are not interrupted. And most lives are not ruined by a lack of potential. They are ruined by interruption, interruption by impulse, interruption by insecurity, interruption by comparison, interruption by one more purchase to feel normal, one more upgrade to feel successful, one more indulgence to feel soothed, one more delay because the beginning feels too slow. Do not underestimate what you are really doing when you save that first 1,000. You are not collecting emergency money, you are not winning a budgeting challenge, you are not proving a guru right. You are crossing a line that separates people who are fully labor, powered from people who have started converting life into capital. That line is invisible to the crowd. It will be visible to you later. Much later, when your choices widen, your fear narrows, your work becomes less desperate, and your time stops being auctioned off so cheaply, you will realize the most important move was not some glamorous investment. It was the moment you stopped dismissing small sums as powerless. Because small sums are not powerless. Unprotected small sums disappear. Directed small sums ignite. And once the engine is lit, the whole game changes. So here is the real test. The next time money hits your account, do not ask the usual weak question. Do not ask what you feel like buying. Do not ask what everybody else is doing. Do not ask what would make this week feel easier. Ask the only question that matters. Will this dollar feed the engine, or will it feed the fire that keeps me stuck? One answer gives you a moment. The other answer gives you a life. You do not need to feel rich to begin. You do not need to feel ready. You do not need to feel inspired. You need to decide whether you are finally going to cross the ignition threshold, protect that first 1,000, like it is the first spark of an entirely different future, and keep feeding it until the machine becomes strong enough to carry you, because after that, the battle is not over. But it is no longer hand-to-hand combat. And that difference is the beginning of freedom.